Hello, friends. I had something else queued up for today, but in the past week, along with pretty much every other acrobat on the planet and many of the non acrobat humans, I've been really thinking a lot about the twisties and mental blocks and mental fortitude and, let's be honest, Simone Biles. So, you know what? Hear me out for just a bit about all of those things. So, first off, I want to say that Simone Biles is an absolute legend who has more talent and more skill in her pinky toe than most humans have in their entire bodies, myself included. And hopefully, by the end of this video, you will agree with me that stepping back the way she did demonstrates how amazing an athlete she is and how amazing a human she is, rather than really taking anything away from that. Second, I want to focus on those two words that I used, skill and talent. And I want to ground this in talking about skill rather than talent. Skills are things that we learn and we work for and we develop over a long time. Talents are inborn propensities and characteristics that just sort of happen. And the kind of skill that Biles displays, the kind of things she can do, aren't just talents. She didn't wake up one morning without any training and invent four new gymnastics moves. That's not how it works. Talking about skill rather than talking about talent reframes the discussion in two important ways. First, it gives Biles credit for the amazing amount of effort and determination and dedication that she has shown to her art. And second, it doesn't discount the fact that even if you are as talented as Biles is, there is always hard work and there is always risk involved in doing this kind of acrobatics. In a lot of ways, it's probably easier to think that athletes like Biles are just magically talented. They have some kind of special juice that the rest of us lack. And it means that they can do effortlessly things that would be impossible for us on our best day in our wildest imaginations. And that gets us off of the hook in two ways. First of all, it means that there's no reason to work as hard as they do because we were doomed from the beginning. So why not spend another hour on the couch instead of going to the gym? And secondly, it gets us around the sort of creepy nature of watching gymnastics, which is that the athletes are risking their necks for basically our entertainment. And so it's easier to think of it that they're not really in any danger. They're not really doing that because it's easy. Gravity doesn't apply to Simone Biles. And part of that is baked into the sport. Part of being an elite gymnast or an elite acrobat is convincing the audience that these things are in fact easy for you, making it look effortless. But the risk never really goes away. And that also isn't really to say that people don't have natural talents or that Biles's body shape and size, her ability to put on muscle, her natural coordination and grace, those don't feed into her being an amazing gymnast. They absolutely do. But nobody reinvents a field the way Biles has reinvented women's gymnastics with only natural talent. And no amount of natural talent can make the kinds of moves that Simone Biles does completely safe. That's just not how it works. I'm starting here because I really want to ground this discussion in the fact that the kind of things that Biles does and the kind of things that all acrobats do are learned skills. That going into the gym and rehearsing isn't just about building strength or flexibility or stamina, although it definitely does do all three of those things. It's also about learning pathways, about forming muscle memory, about gaining proprioception and aerial awareness. And that latter category of things are neurological things. They're learned skills and instincts. And neurological things can disappear on a moment's notice. Just like I've been getting tongue-tied while filming this video, even though I fully know how to talk, sometimes you have a bad day and your proprioception just goes away in a flash. In case you haven't heard the terminology yet, which would be a little bit surprising if you've at all been following this discussion, there are a whole class of terms that different communities use to refer to this spontaneous loss of muscle memory. Performers call it the yips. Divers and gymnasts call it the twisties. You get the point. Something that took years of hard work and learning to build up in careful incremental progressions, just on one bad day, poof, it is momentarily gone. And the instinct in that moment, honestly, is to fight for it. It's a serious problem for athletes. Most athletes have at least one story of this happening to them. So here's one of mine. I started college as a varsity diver. I actually founded my school's diving team, and I share that particular gem with you as a demonstration of two things. First of all, it should give you a sense of how very deeply serious my alma mater was about athletics of all varieties, that prior to my matriculation, they did not even have a diving team. I was not there for diving. But second, it hopefully demonstrates at least a little bit how much I cared about it. I knew it wasn't going to be my career, but I was willing to go out of my way to make opportunities to do it. It was, in theory at least, a low pressure, just for fun hobby that I really, really loved. And it was, until the first big meet of the season, when in the middle of a front 2.5, I completely forgot where I was in the air and wiped out. Belly flops are normal in diving. It's a thing. It happens, and you shake it off. And I did, to the best of my ability. I was also sort of feeling leery about it, and I went to my coach and I asked her if we could at least change my list, and she said no. In fact, it wasn't until halfway through the competition when I was standing on the board and realized that I couldn't see the edges of the board that I pulled the plug. And my coach admitted that diving blind was too dangerous for a hobby. When I went to the medic and they tested me for a concussion, they saw that my eyes were not dilating properly, and they chastised me for even thinking about going back on the board after an injury like that. So cool, I had a valid medical reason to not finish out the competition. It took me about a year to be cleared by doctors to come back. And that was a year of constant migraine headaches. I studied with the lights off because the migraines were just too bad. But what actually ended my career was not any of that, but was a conversation I had with my coach at the end of all of that, when the doctors had cleared me to return, when she told me that she no longer really wanted to coach me because she had decided that what I had demonstrated when injured was a lack of dedication, and that it would be unfair to the other athletes on the team who had worked throughout that time to bring me back, because I was more naturally talented than them, but they really stuck with it. And just as a side note, she was completely wrong about that. My natural talents are for reading and coming up with weird thought experiments, and it took me until age 10 to feel comfortable going downstairs. So yeah, really, really physically, naturally talented. Sure, that sounds right. But also, that was what took the joy out of it. This was a hobby. And it's not worth doing a hobby that just makes you hated. So, the twisties are real, and they are dangerous, possibly life-threatening in sports like gymnastics. And it is a testament to how far the gymnastics community has come in recent years that Biles' teammates and coaches are standing by her when she draws this entirely reasonable line, safety requirement, that they're treating her with love and compassion, and they're standing by her side. Because pretending that good athletes don't get the twisties is about as absurd as saying that good drivers never get in car crashes. That's not how the world works. That's not how any of this works. The twisties can happen to anyone. And most of us are just lucky enough that it doesn't happen to us when we are about to win the Olympics. You know that feeling you get when you're talking and there is a word that is on the tip of your tongue and you just can't get it? And it's not even that you've forgotten it. Like you can feel the hole in the place where it used to be in your brain, but just like in that moment, the it's gone. And the harder you reach for it, the worse it gets. That's what the twisties feels like. I was once coaching a girl on diving. Not even coaching. Like I wasn't her regular coach. I was a substitute coach. And this little muffin forgot how to do a front flip. And the harder she tried, and she kept trying, the worse it got. And I could see that this was just a fluke. I knew it. But she couldn't internalize that. And it just got worse and worse and worse until for an entire hour, she had just progressively, more thoroughly lost her front flip. And I felt like the worst coach in the world, right? Like I sub in for my friend and people lose their skills. How terrible is that? And at the end of it, I even went to her parents to say like, hey, like, talk to her and remind her that she has this skill and this isn't something that she needs to worry about and that today was a fluke. But no matter what I said, she felt like she had something to prove on that day. Even though the harder she reached for it, the worse it got. And, like, I wished that I was closer to her so that she would have, I guess, believed me when I said that. Or that I had a role model that I could point to, like Biles, so that I could say, like, look, the twisties happens. It happens to the best of us. And it doesn't mean that you've lost that skill. It means that you need to take a step back for today, and it'll come back. And I think that it's great that we have that role model now. There are like two foundational power moves in straps. The kind of moves that you expect to see in just about every professional level straps routine. And they are roll ups and transfers, and I only have roll ups. This is not because of a lack of strength or coordination on my part, and I say this because I have seen people with less strength than I have and less coordination than I have successfully do transfers many times. Yeah, it's a mental block. It is entirely a mental block. But I have felt the twisties on both of them. When I'm not exceptionally tired, I can do roll ups, even at the end of a routine. And right now, I'm working on embellishing them and finding interesting ways in and doing really impressive dynamic moves out of them. All of that kind of lovely, dynamic, dramatic goodness. They are my jam. But a bit over a year ago, even like before the pandemic started, there were a couple practices where I reached for them and they were just gone. And I was shook. This was my thing. It was my one power move that I really had, and it was gone. And whether that was because of a really stressful time, which it was, or just bad luck, which it also was, I don't know. But I guess to my credit, I responded to it by, blaming the rigging or the weather or what I had eaten that day and walking away from it and coming back later. And just as quickly as they went away, they came back. I still have roll ups now. I have some days where they just go, but those days are rare. And the vast majority of the time, if I'm not exceptionally tired, I can do roll ups. Contrast that with transfers. I have been almost getting and very rarely actually doing, and then losing the next day transfers for about 7 years. It is the most frustrating thing. And I have done them on good days. And those good days are not like otherwise good, they're just good transfer days. So I don't think it's strength or coordination or even not knowing the pathway. It's a mental block. 100% a mental block. And as best I can tell, the way that I got where I am with transfers is that on one day they just went away, and I responded to that by fighting for it and trying it over and over and over and over and over again. And I trained the failure. And what that means is that now my body isn't entirely sure how to actually do a transfer, how it should actually feel, but it knows real well how to fail at transfers. And so that's what it does. And every time I have a new coach or a new pathway I'm trying or any of that, I get into this kind of terrible mental place of like, oh, is this it? Is this going to be the moment where I actually get it? Or am I still cursed? And there's just so much pressure on it that my body defaults to what it knows, which is failing. So far, I'm still cursed. I have a hypothesis, which is that whether the Twisties stays a limited one day random fluke kind of problem or becomes a really chronic mental block that requires completely relearning the skills through basic progressions and learning new cues comes down to how we respond to it. Because the muscle memory that we're talking about is a neurological phenomenon. It is a learned neurological pathway. And just like a muscle can cramp up on a bad day, one of the chains in that neurological link can just misfire. And if you respond to that by walking away from it and letting that one neuron, I guess, figure out its deal, then the entire pathway has a chance to heal and recover in basically the same place that it always was. Because the bulk of your practicing and learning still outweighs that one fluke. But if you respond to that temporary misfiring in one part of the chain by training it and training it and training it and continuing to hit it, you are retraining that failure. And you are retraining that neurological pathway to take you in a very unproductive direction. And then you have a mental block. And you have to relearn the entire skill starting from the basics. So, giving yourself space, it is about safety, but it's not just about safety. It isn't just that in that moment the skill isn't there, and so to try to do it risks breaking your neck. It's also that the fastest way to get the skill back is to take a step back and let the neurological pathway recover on its own. Let the bulk of your practice define you instead of that one moment of random failure. As a conclusion, I want to take this back to this idea of skills versus talent versus dedication, and how this plays into mental fortitude. Because there's a really bad hot take that I've seen that basically parrots what my coach told me, which is that not fighting through it on the day of in that moment is somehow lacking in mental fortitude. You know, the sure, Simone Biles has more talent than the rest of the world combined, but she isn't showing the dedication and mental fortitude we expect from Olympians. Um, and that's offensive nonsense for two reasons. First, it forgets that to develop the kind of skill that Biles has, you don't just need talent, you also need determination and fortitude. Determination and fortitude is what keeps you coming to the gym on the day off when it's not exciting, when it's not a competition. It's what lets you build that skill over years and years and years. And Biles has absolutely shown that in spades. I think it's really important to remind ourselves that dedication isn't what gets you through the meet. It isn't what you show when it's exciting to be there, when you have a chance of getting on a podium that day. It's what you show the years before that that allow you to get into that competition in the first place. So not only does Simone Biles have nothing to prove to anyone about her talent, she has nothing to prove to anyone about her dedication. Her dedication and her fortitude has already been shown before she walked in expecting to compete on day one of the Olympics. Second, I know from experiencing it myself and from seeing it in athletes that I work with that what you want to do in that moment is fight it, right? Because you show up on the day and there's an audience and you're excited and ready to compete. And then all of a sudden, this thing that you thought you could count on, that you define yourself with, is just gone. And it freaks you out. And you're like, no, okay, I can do this. I'm just going to push harder. I'm just going to throw harder. I'm just going to do it. And it still doesn't work. And then the panic sets in and you are grasping at straws, trying to figure out some way to make this work. And that's how you get injured. So let's be honest about what Simone Biles is actually doing right now. Because she is responding to a life-changing and random disappointment at what really was going to be the year-delayed proudest moment in her life. Not with denial or anger or panic or resentment, but with strength and poise and joy in her teammates' accomplishments. And candidly, that takes the kind of mental fortitude that makes her gymnastics look easy. Simone Biles is an absolute legend, and she is entirely the kind of person that we should be holding up as a role model to every little athlete. So, thanks for listening to this rant about sports and also feelings. Next time should be more about making things and less about preaching. But I do hope that you enjoyed this. I do hope that it gave you a little bit of a different perspective on it. And maybe it just gave you an excuse to go and watch some clips of Simone Biles doing gymnastics, because those are absolutely evergreen. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.